The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the hosts and guests as individuals, and do not necessarily reflect those of advertisers or sponsors. This show is intended as entertainment and commentary only. The producers strive for verisimilitude, but nothing said on this podcast should be taken as fact by the listener or viewer without performing due diligence.
How you doing, everybody? Andrew Scott, host of the Keep Your Hat On podcast, and also the producer, which means the guy responsible for getting this thing out into the wild. So this episode was recorded right before Thanksgiving and was supposed to be out about 2 weeks later. But then life happened. It's been a really crazy December. And so I apologize to you guys and to my fellow presenters for this being out so late, but okay, it happens sometimes. But I want to take a minute on behalf of Mark and Chris and Ty and Michael to thank you guys for being patient with us sometimes and for sticking with us. We know there's not a whole lot of viewers and a whole lot of listeners, but for those people who are here with us, we really do appreciate you, and we're grateful for your support and you following us. I'm going to admit that 2023 is kind of a year for me to really lean into this podcast because aside from the fact that the five of us, all like doing it, we think that we have something valuable to contribute, even if it's just 4 friendly voices. We could use more friendly voices right now. But anyways, not to get all heavy on you. Actually, that happens at the end of the episode. But from everybody, Dr. Mark, Chris, Ty, myself, and our dear announcer, Michael, Happy New Year. Let's get on with the show.
Existence, the physical universe, is basically playful. There is no necessity for it whatsoever. It isn't going anywhere. That is to say, it doesn't have some destination that it ought to arrive at.
Sounds great. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Keep Your Hat On, the show where hell even we don't know where we're going to go. I'm Andrew Scott, along with Dr. Mark Peterson and Ty Robert Anthony and Christopher Vacano. And we're just jumping into this and we're doing this. This is the way we roll now, apparently. And we're going to be talking a little bit about nostalgia, but actually something that ties into this. We're talking about continuity. I am doing a video that discusses continuity, and Dr. Mark just brought up to me, we all grew up watching the old original Superman television show with George Reeves. Very sad, weird story that happens with George.
A movie, by the way, they did a movie about that.
There was. We'll link to that below. Interesting story, but sad and creepy. Anyways, one of the things that used to happen by way of continuity in that show, like Dr. Mark just pointed out, is you'd be watching and then they'd go from one scene to another and somebody would be wearing something different or different shoes or something would move on a shelf. And that's an example of blown continuity. But you asked me, Mark, if there are other examples about it. And this actually very neatly dovetails in to one of my points of both continuity and nostalgia for this time of year.
Oh.
And that is WKRP in Cincinnati.
Oh.
This episode right now that we're recording is going out. We're recording it right before Thanksgiving. It's going to go out. We're talking to you in December.
Everybody's thinking of the turkey episode right
the
now.
classic turkey episode.
I swear to God, turkeys could fly.
Yes.
It is right. And see, we all immediately know what we're talking about, and we are all laughing out loud because I swear to God, it is one of the fucking funniest things that has ever wound up being broadcast on television.
Oh, yeah.
They're hitting the ground like sacks of wet cement. It's just so funny. And I just have this warm, glowing feeling whenever I think about it. My dad and I watched it broadcast live in real time like you used to have to do.
Yeah.
And you know, I think I was like 9, something like that. And you know that moment in your life when you suddenly cross over this invisible boundary of laughing because your family or laughing like peers. And that was a moment between me and my old man where we just laughed our asses off as fellow human beings about something that was so beyond funny we couldn't stop. But and of course we'll try to show it here. If I can't, I'll link down to it because the whole episode is brilliant.
It is a kind of ritual bonding experience, isn't it? It's like
yeah, it is.
You know, like we were sitting around a campfire 10,000 years ago, beating on drums, and Ugg dropped a rock on his foot, and then you and your dad lose it laughing.
Exactly. And then anytime anybody drops a rock, Ugg is going to be remembered fondly. But when it comes to continuity, WKRP in Cincinnati is a great example of preserving continuity because, and to this day, so many people don't either remember this or never caught it. Les Nessman, in every single episode of WKRP in Cincinnati, aside from the invisible
I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, the tape on the floor. Yep.
Is the Band-Aid.
Yeah, he always had a Band-Aid. Yeah.
The ever-moving Band-Aid. There was a bandage on that poor man. You were never told why he injured himself. You never see him injuring himself. It's just this wandering, roving Band-Aid.
Was that his idea, or was there somebody, in the production staff that thought, it would be funny? Or
apocryphally, the story goes that Richard Sanders, the guy who played Les, injured himself the night before the first full cast recording and had to wear a plaster, had to wear a bandage. And they couldn't not have it in camera. So the production crew just decided, like we here, this is our ethos on Keep Your Hat On, is, well, if it's got to be in, let's just point to it. But let's point to it in a very subtle way. We'll turn it into a running gag. And I think it, I haven't done the deep dive on it, but I'm pretty sure that it features in almost every single episode.
No, that's a thing, I think, isn't it?
And it makes it quietly all that much more funny because, and I mean, I remember it was probably 4 or 5 episodes into the series that I kind of caught that something was going on with this Band-Aid.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there watching with my mom and dad and looking at my mom going, I wonder where the Band-Aid's going to be. And she goes, well, they're in the bathroom. And I was like, no, unless. Where's the Band-Aid going to show up? She had not even noticed at all. Yeah. But WKRP in Cincinnati for me is a major point of nostalgia. And when we come back from the break, we're going to kind of dive, joke, broke my neck diving. We're going to dive into nostalgia and a discussion of nostalgia on the other side of this break. In the meantime, sit tight. I'm Andy. That's Mark. That's Chris. That's Ty. We'll be back in just a second. Don't go away. Bye-bye. And we're back on Keep Your Hat On, the show where hell, even we don't know where we're going to go. And we are proving it right now with Ty Robert Anthony. There we go. I was just looking for a sign of life. And Christopher Vacano and the Mike Eater himself, Dr. Mark Peterson. It is getting towards the holiday season, and some of us suffer, and I say suffer consciously, some of us suffer from some pretty severe nostalgia.
Oh, dear.
So, Ty, what's the most nostalgic thing that you experience through this time of year?
October is Rocky Horror.
Right. Okay.
Gotta sit down and watch Rocky Horror.
God bless you, Tim Curry.
And when I can, I have to do this by myself because she's just not into it. But
there's nothing worse than being forced into nostalgia by yourself.
Wow.
National Lampoon's Vacation.
Yeah.
This is a
Oh yeah.
Sure.
Even though it's so wrong.
Wait, did you say the Christmas Vacation or just the regular vacation?
No,
Christmas vacation.
Yeah, Christmas
So
vacation.
this is, I did not know this until I discovered that my old neighbor across the street in West Bend, Ted, was one of those people. And he used to goose up. No, it's like he would like splash. His whole freaking house was one of these electric glow snow globes every Christmas time.
Yeah.
And then one year it was like he'd actually gotten his brother-in-law to like park a motorhome in the front of the house.
Oh, right on.
And it was
Right
like,
on.
I finally got to ask him. It's like, so Ted, you know, this is eerily like, and he goes, Chevy Chase? It was like, dude, what? There's apparently like his family was a cult for this, for the Christmas movie from Lampoon. And they had like down to like the antler glasses and the odd shaped presents on the table that were all those like, they were like, so this is a thing, Robert. I didn't know you were doing that. Do you do that?
I don't get that heavily into that. That's
okay. You're not that.
That's
great. You don't get the
film
motorhome.
entirely.
You'd have a lot of explaining to do to the wife if you start going that depth.
But it's, just there
Wow.
are some things that are just so wrong in that movie, but so good.
Yeah.
I just laugh about she can't blink because her eyes are frozen.
Right?
Yeah, that whole routine is just hilarious. And then the routine in the mall is just.
Mine is still Jelly of the Month Club.
Or the rant that he goes on and then at the very end he says,
"Hallelujah! Holy shit! Where's the Tylenol?"
Yeah.
It's just so funny.
Chris, you? And this can be I shouldn't make it exclusive to Christmas. We're in front of Thanksgiving, but
it is. Yeah, I mean, it's seasonal. It's Thanksgiving. Actually, it starts at Halloween.
Seasonal affective disorder for me. Mine is
Yeah. It's for me. It's television. My holidays were always shaped by Charlie Brown, and starting with Great Pumpkin, and then the Thanksgiving, and then the Christmas, Rankin and Bass,
top motion animation.
One of the key points of nostalgia for me, even though it's utter rubbish, is Rudolph.
Of course.
And it's, I mean, part of why I'm such a 50s geek is because I just obsessively love the visual style of Rudolph. I mean, that made such an impression on me as a kid. And I was pondering this because, I knew we'd be talking about nostalgia today. I was pondering this, and I realized what I'm nostalgic for in the holidays is someone else's nostalgia, because these were shows that were all...
That's a really good point.
These were all shows that were made in the 50s.
And got very meta for us in that, we were... I mean,
they just were the holidays.
That we never experienced.
Man,
right.
This is so interesting. Yeah, we're just far enough apart generationally, you guys, that we all know the same TV shows, but only because you might have seen them on TV Land. Right?
Well, we just saw them in reruns every year.
Reruns.
All three of us are in our 50s. You're
a little too old for that. So you're
That's
outside of that.
No, we experienced what I would couch it as the first wave of nostalgia. The Charlie Brown, all the Peanut stuff showed up on CBS. we would have right, exactly, with the eye flying at you, kind of like
that one kid.
I mean, this stuff is just burned into our memories.
That's right.
And I mean,
that's right.
That's another point of nostalgia, I guess, that we'll have to go to, and that is A Christmas Story.
Of course, Ralphie.
Ralphie. And
I think I was in college when that came out, and so it's like everybody talks, right? But it's one of those things. It's like,
no, it's way more a Gen X thing than it is a tail end boomer.
There you are.
Totally recognize that.
Yeah.
But what's funny about that, of course, is that's the first holiday thing that was representative, generally speaking, of how we as a generation grew up.
Yeah.
And the ties to Wisconsin in that I mean, seriously, I was one of the kids who froze his tongue to a flagpole. I did that.
We should have known that, though.
We were shoulda, coulda, woulda, man. Life experience. And so it's the generation after us, Gen Y, that really was the one that started getting it on TV land and cable and stuff like that.
Right.
Because for many years, a lot of that stuff started to go away in favor of contemporizing Christmas stories, with a very special episode of this, that, or the other thing that was currently on television. And then, of course, right when we were, as Gen X, when we were coming of age, you had this wave, I would couch it as infestation, of Hallmark holiday classics. That were out of the
and now it's a year-round industry. I mean, that's all
I can
Hallmark
proudly say
does.
I don't think I've ever seen one of those.
Well, I've never gone through a whole one. I've only gotten them, hit on the side of the head as I was walking past somebody else watching.
They can all write themselves, by the way. Just for fun, we used to just make up the plot lines where former girl who didn't make the cheerleading team goes to New York City, becomes a famous, wealthy lawyer, moves home, runs into the former football player she was had a crush on, who is now a firefighter. Right. And rediscovers and rekindles their childhood romance after some difficulties with the pretty girl who wanted to marry the firefighter is still in the town.
Well, yeah. And you got to get the one-legged dog rescue in there somewhere.
Named Scruffy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. See, and
what?
you
Bobby's in the well.
You nailed the thing about the Hallmark holiday movies is you've seen one, you've seen them all. Because it is exactly the same story over and over and over again. It's just different window dressing.
If it hasn't been turned into a thing, I've just figured out a way to make the four of us rich. We do this. Everybody comes up with 10 different characters, 10 different plot lines, 10 different twists, and 10 different random things, and we put it into a book like Mad Libs. And
I was going to say Hallmark Holiday Mad Libs.
Your own shitty story.
What if we did a Words Against Humanity version of that?
I love it.
There's already Cards Against the Holidays. If there isn't, free one.
Have it, kids. Somebody has that.
That's actually true. I tell you what, we're going to take another quick break. We're going to come back on the other end and actually start talking about something, important. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. And we're back. This is the third segment of Keep Your Hat On. I'm going to keep us plowing forward.
Oh, boy.
I love it. Hey, I do want to chime in one more bit of nostalgia. You mentioned WKRP earlier and the Thanksgiving, the turkey episode.
Yeah.
My absolute favorite WKRP is the Christmas episode where Art Carlson, it's Christmas Carol. He gets into the brownies laced with weed, which were actually just regular brownies. And he's visited. It's all about giving raises to the staff and whatever, or holiday bonuses. That to me, I mean, it's wonderful. It's just, I love that episode.
All right, I'm going to complain about this now. So this is the grouchy old man remembering things. And I have two, since it's seasonal
with cloud, but
but it's seasonal, and it's also, this is one of the, it is old man.
Off my lawn.
Yeah, it is one of old man screaming at clouds. So here's the thing I kind of missed. There's two details here. One has to do with college football, and the other one is the Macy's Day Parade.
Okay.
And what I miss, and it's because I've tried watching the Macy's Day Parade in like more recent decades, and I can't, because it's no longer a parade, right? It is now this show in front of NBC, right, in front of Rockefeller Plaza.
Is it even in front of? Branding, is it in front of Macy's?
Who knows? Okay. And it used to actually just be the parade, right?
Right.
And you'd wait for Underdog, right? Especially, of course, my generation.
Year,
or Kermit.
And there was no Kermit then.
No, Kermit didn't come in until our generation and a little bit
after. There was no Kermit yet. We had Underdog. Felix the Cat still showed up, which is like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so like there were all all of those balloons. And I remember the year they introduced like a Snoopy balloon. This was like, probably 1969, 1970, something like that. When they were naming Apollo missions after Charlie Brown, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. But I miss just watching the freaking parade. And now it's like, the cutting is so fast now that you can't just watch that anymore. Yeah. And so in the same weird freaking zone was in the ancient days. So this is even when I was in college, this is like in the mid 70s. I loved watching football. I'm a big college football fan, more than even the pros. And although I'm kind of hopeful now that the Packers are having like the worst season in decades. And I'm kind of happy about that, because it's going to get everybody's head back in where it belongs. Anyway, but in the old football games, Keith Jackson called them for ABC. I freaking love that man. That was the purity of the game. But there wasn't like the huge advertising like there is today. And so they would actually, and so here's the thing I miss. Everybody my age will miss this too. They used to show you the bands during halftime.
Oh yeah.
And it was like that was like the ritual process of the game was to have man. And then Ohio State, the tuba guy would come out and dot the I. You maybe remember this.
In Colorado, we had an annual competition every year that was televised called Drums Along the Rockies.
That's famous though too. That was famous, yeah.
And yeah, I mean that was like totally a Colorado thing to do.
And, Mark, for us, both Crimson Tide and UW-Madison had absolutely unbelievable marching.
The bands, unbelievable. The $1 Million Band at Bama, Roll Tide. And here with the Badgers, man, the Badgers band is like a famous like endless musical orgy of some sort. I'm not involved in this, but it's like that's what I hear. It's like they have gotten in trouble in some hotels because
they bring the ethos.
They bring the tuba, man. That's what happens.
This one time at band camp,
right? And
it's all band camp.
That is another point of nostalgia for me, man. When you get into October and somebody starts playing the beer barrel polka, I start hearing polka. Man, it's that time of year.
You miss fish fry, Andy? Do you miss fish fries?
I miss fish fry.
I mean, you're out there.
Let me count the waves.
You're out there where there's real fish. I mean, they got fish where you are.
But here's the thing about that, and again, another point of nostalgia. I grew up eating lake perch. I grew up eating perch, freshwater walleye, muskie, pike, things like that, and lake perch. And really, right about the time I left, I moved out to the left coast here, and right at the millennium, and just the tail end of '99.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to my dad a couple years later, like 2001, 2002. And I was just like, have you been getting out for fish fry? And he's like, it ain't worth it anymore. They got to use cod. It doesn't taste the same. And I was like, why? And I started doing some investigation right around the millennium, man. They put a prohibition on pulling lake perch. You really couldn't get it anymore unless you were an independent fisherman in a small lake. And
there were a couple of firms that overfished like crazy.
Yeah.
And I probably got, a few $100s fine, and then they wiped out the perch stocks in the lake. And for our fans from other places, because I lived on the Gulf Coast, so I have a real snobbery about fish, but walleye is the freshwater pompano. I'm just gonna put that out there.
That's actually a really good analogy. It's because pompano, for those who don't know, pompano is a really interesting fish because it's sweet.
Oh, it's the best, man.
Wonderful profile, and it's really flaky, tender, and you're right, because walleye and muskie and they're all kind of in the same family, and perch. Yeah. It has this wonderful nutty sweetness to it that you don't get anywhere else.
No, it's a weird experience. And when I got back here, it's like when I got back to the Midwest. Remember, I got enculturated into the Wisconsin tradition of fish fry. And so, for those of you out there, MJ Stevens in Slinger, Wisconsin, has the best fish fry in North America. Just saying. Anyway,
I'm not doing that. I remember.
People will go to war over this, and cheese curds, of course. That's the other thing. But I remember thinking, it's like I kind of went in. It's like, fish fry. Well, that'll be nice, because I've been eating grouper and stuffed flounder and redfish and red snapper. But walleye, baby. Just saying, that's
walleye is good. And
that's all I'm going to say.
What was interesting to me is when my marriage ended. When my marriage ended and I moved out on my own, I moved into a very hipstery area of Portland. I was up on top of Mount Tabor, and right down the road from me on Hawthorne Boulevard was one of the area's most famous fish restaurants. The guy who owned that particular spot was a huge Packer fan, and so when you walked in, there was a mock Lombardi trophy that greeted you, and the whole place was a Packer bar. And so I literally had a Packer bar 6 blocks away from where I was living. And
that shit happens. When I was down in Mobile about 10 years ago, and they found like 10 Packer fans wearing cheese heads in a local bar in Mobile. And of course they did this like anthropological survey of, it's like, they're called cheese heads.
Exactly. So
it was really sweet. What other items here though? Those are my two.
What I haven't heard anybody speak about is The Grinch That Stole Christmas.
Oh,
After my time.
And I mean the original Grinch. I mean Boris.
Mr.
animated. Yeah.
Boris Karloff, man. You're right.
Yeah.
That's right. I loved his dog. Oh my God.
Oh, if you didn't, you were dead inside. Come on.
Yeah. I felt so bad for that dog.
Everybody did. But here's the thing. I agree with you, Ty, but we're on food, so let's stick with food. Your most nostalgic food thing. And tell you what, let's broaden it out.
Oh my God, I got one. Go on.
All right, Ty.
Green bean casserole.
Yeah.
It's just not a holiday season unless you've had a plate with green bean casserole. Good green bean casserole.
Yeah. Well, and I will back you in that there is such a thing as good green bean casserole.
Absolutely. That's stuff that you are eating and you know that you're full, but it tastes so good that you just continue
to eat. Stop. That's the thing that's going to give you the food poisoning that's just going to make you fall asleep until the next day, just pounding that stuff down. Chris, what have you got?
That's one way to look at it.
Wow. Chris, what have you got by way of food nostalgia?
I'm trying to think of neither of my the two bits of food nostalgia that come to mind are specifically holiday related. Actually, one of them is
we can broaden it out.
Yeah, it is Halloween related. One of them, but I know you guys are just going to absolutely eviscerate me for the other one. So I'll start with that one so we can get it out of the way.
Everybody, get the knives out.
I got a machete here somewhere.
Awesome.
Real nostalgic food for me is Hush Puppies from Red Lobster.
Boo. Boo.
Wow. Your parents hated you. Is that what you're saying, Chris?
Well,
He
lived
was
in
alone
Colorado.
on
I mean,
every
that
holiday.
was where we got seafood.
That was,
that's right.
Yeah, in Colorado, your choices are kind of limited.
Totally. That's right.
So
you mean they didn't have an Applebee's?
Don't they have like mountain hush puppies? Isn't that like a thing?
Free range hush puppies.
No, there's nothing. You might be thinking of Rocky Mountain oysters, but
no, we're not.
I sort of wasn't, but yeah.
Okay.
That was the furthest thing from my mind.
I was talking about the free range hush puppies that were trucked in from the Wyoming hush puppies.
What do you do? I'm a hush puppy breeder.
I must have missed that while I was there. Yeah, the other nostalgia is candy. Is a certain type of candy that is no longer being made, and it breaks my heart because it was, to me, the best candy ever, and that's Necco Wafers.
Oh yeah,
what?
They don't make those anymore?
They stopped making them like 3 years ago.
Yeah, they do.
But here's the thing, and this is one of the wonderful things of our modern life, and that is, if enough people get nostalgic for something, somebody will buy the manufacturing rights and pull it out of mothball.
Somebody please put it in the chat.
You know what? I can every once in a while. No, seriously, every once in a while I come across them. Right?
Yeah, I still spot them. I just know that they're made by a different company.
Sometimes they're like big. Right? They even have the
like
big
Necco
ones where you look at them and you go, "Who is there?"
That would get me back to
syringe
church.
of insulin for this too? I mean,
oh my god, my thing was, and you guys can eviscerate me for this, but one of the things that to this day I will fight you over candy corn. I friggin' love. Sit there,
I like
just
candy corn.
Nope.
I've never understood the strong feelings about candy corn.
Remember the hard candies? They only were at grandma's.
Oh yeah,
right. All the holiday
Werther's
ones
mints. You mean the one with the crinkly with the? Oh wait,
Yeah.
you mean with the crinkly the Werther's caramels, right? With the crinkly butterscotch shells.
Those and I'm talking about the hard candy that was like in ribbons, and then you had like the orange one. You had this variety of hard candy that you could only find at grandma's house.
Well, I didn't have a grandma, but I had an aunt who served as one, and that's where I went for that fix. You're absolutely right.
What I didn't get about candy corn was, and we've all done this, is
sugar.
No, not that. It's that. Didn't you try eating the white part first, and then try the orange part, and then see if they tasted differently from each other?
Oh, I used to do that all the time.
I'm the only. Chris and I are the only two.
And I thought they did actually taste different.
No, of course they didn't taste different. They're just
it's all the same.
And placebo effect.
I probably did
That's
it
just
once.
like saying Fruit Loops all
tasted
different. They didn't. They never did.
The blue one tastes blue. The
red. My God.
Well, and now that I think about it, you guys are shattering a lot of memories for me, because like zebra striped gum.
I remember that.
That all tasted exactly the same.
If you got out the X-Acto blade and you were cutting out each color,
wow,
well, we're gonna have to have a conversation of a different shade at that point.
Well, I tell you what, folks, we're going to come back and we're going to wrap this weird nostalgic trip up, because I really want to talk about the experience of nostalgia. And we'll do so after we come back from this break on the Narrowband Broadcast Network. That's Ty, that's Chris, that's Dr. Mark. I'm Andy. We'll be back in just a second. Don't go anywhere, unless it's like to the bathroom or maybe the fridge. Welcome back, everybody, to Keep Your Hat On, the final segment of Keep Your Hat On. I'm Andrew Scott, along with my good friends Hi, Robert Anthony, and Christopher Vacano, and the sneaky bastard himself, Dr. Mark Peterson.
Oh,
and we're talking nostalgia here. Now, I am going to set this little portion up in that, I'm 54 years old, and this past year for me has really been a train wreck as far as my health goes. I was in the hospital 6 times during a friggin' global pandemic, and I had to have a surgery, and I'm still dealing with a bunch of stuff. Things are better, but the nostalgia I felt start to creep in at the beginning of the pandemic. And I think a lot of that has to do with, everybody was self-isolating. We were all kind of in our cocoons and in our silos. And you go to the things that give you comfort in times of stress, right? That's just a general way of living. And it really did start pushing me into places of nostalgia. And the Buddhist practitioner in me, and Ty, you'll probably be able to speak to this a little as well. The Buddhist practitioner in me feels really concerned when I start feeling nostalgic, because it means that you are trying to re-experience something from the past emotionally. Not let it land on you emotionally and feel those emotions contemporarily, but literally embody the zeitgeist, literally embody what being in the past felt like. And that's kind of not where you go when you're supposed to be meditating or when you're supposed to be pursuing a Buddhist type of practice. You're supposed to try to stay in the here and now. And so it started making me reflect on the act of reflection and the act of feeling nostalgic. And then, of course, you dump that all on top of the incredible tumult that the last 7 years have been. That made me go, wow, I'm nostalgic for older presidents. I'm nostalgic for times in our past where life was easier. And Mark, I know that you have, and you voiced this on episodes in the past, but now I'm going to give you the mic and let you run wild. I know that you have kind of a theory about nostalgia, and you have strong feelings about nostalgia, and I'm interested in knowing what they are.
And originally, actually, I'm just double checking my math here. The term wasn't coined until the late 17th century, and it originally came out of this. Yeah, I know actually, I'm looking at it right here. Coined in a dissertation at the University of Basel by Johannes Hofer, and a way of rendering the German Heimweh, homesickness.
Yeah, homesickness.
And the funny thing about nostalgia, right, is it's a homesickness for a home you didn't really have. I think that's the experience of it. And without jumping into neck deep in the semiotic background of this thing, is you have to. The way I think about this is, there's a difference between the facts you have about your life and the relationship you have to those facts. Right?
They can be very different things.
And that relational,
they are very different things neurologically,
and they are. And it's like, we have to figure out how to mediate, right? How to deal with the facts of our lives, right? Whether they're good or bad. I was thinking, we were joking about this coming in because I'm actually wearing my. Here, wait a second. Speaking of nostalgia, I'm wearing my my gang colors here, my University of Toronto sweatshirt, and I'm kind of embarrassed that I have one, but I did notice this, when I got out here into the rural heartland of America, is like nobody had ever heard of Toronto. Is like, I actually knew things when I got here. It's like nobody cares. And one of the things I've noticed is and we were just talking about my friend Hugh, who's been on this podcast. We've already romanticized our experience in graduate school. It's like, oh yeah, it was so awesome. Do you remember going here and doing that? And it's like, no, it was horrible, man. We had our heads beaten in for 5-6 years, and it was tough the whole time. But we've reestablished our relationship to the facts, right? And a lot of times what happens, I think, in our own culturally, when facts have been too difficult for us to cope with as a nation, Not that we've seen any of this in the last few years.
No.
We rewrite the relationship. Today, I was moved to tears this morning. Today is the anniversary of Lincoln's Gettysburg Address.
Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived can long endure.
That is a fact. And you should go back and read that sucker today, because it's really good. And it's like a lot of stuff that we've tried to displace. We do this in our own lives all the time, right? As a rule, I had a pretty good childhood, but at some point we all sort of lie about that to ourselves, in one way or the other. Well, and so it's this distinction between, if we can get around to recognizing that there's a difference between what happened and the way we relate ourselves to it. Yeah, we're kind of in a good spot to endure the nostalgia. So a little bit more mundanely, of course, I remember thinking about this even during the 1970s, because that's when they rolled out Happy Days and all of these programs that were about things that had happened 20 years earlier when the boomers were young. I'm at the tail end, right? So it meant nothing to me. Even though I live, just about a half a mile away from where Fonzie lived, from Al's Diner now, but just saying, but it's like, nostalgia is whatever happened 20 years ago. So this is why I was sort of trying to tag you guys with, your particular television generation, right? I'm watching people now just go crazy about the 2000s, right? That's 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I know, because and it's people talking about how great the music was in the 80s. It's like, yeah.
I was just thinking about
that's a hill I'll die on.
And
you know what I mean?
It seems like everybody fell under this spell in the 80s, and the production value was kind of the same. And
well, I want to go back just one more in my own case, right? Because I remember all the great songs that came out of the late 60s, early 70s. There's some really great stuff. But if you look at the playlists, most of them are filled with shit you don't remember.
You're talking about the Billboard charts?
Yeah, I'm just saying it's like, oh, that was there too. That was, I don't remember that. It's like, there's reasons you've stopped remembering it.
Yeah, exactly.
Honestly, not long ago, I did that little exercise, that little online exercise where you go back and look up what the number one Billboard hit was the day you were born or the week you were born. And for me, it was The Candyman by...
which one? Anthony Newley?
Yeah,
no.
Anthony Newley or Sammy Davis?
Sammy Davis Jr.
Sammy Davis Jr.
This gentleman, who can take a sunrise, sprinkle it with dew. Thank you. Cover it with chocolate or a miracle or two. The Candyman. The Candyman can. The Candyman can, cause he mixes it with love.
Who can take it? I won't do it. Oh, Andy, good mouth on it.
I had thought that song was like written before Willy Wonka.
No.
And I learned this weekend it was written for the film version of Willy Wonka.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, see,
but it's okay when Gene Wilder sings it.
I grew up thinking it was for it was an M&M's jingle.
Yeah.
Well, this whole thing actually brings us and going back around to the etymology, not the entomology, because the difference between entomology and etymology is bugs, kids.
That's right.
The root of the word, the term that we use, nostalgia. There's another very interesting word. I believe it's Portuguese, and it's swadad, not crawdad. And I'm probably pronouncing it very wrong because my Portuguese is really
Portuguese
rusty.
is tough, man.
It is. Yeah. It's not Spanish. It's not Italian. It's not a Romance language, but it is. And screw everybody over that mountain range. We're going to do things our own way. But this term saudade actually means being nostalgic for something you never actually experienced yourself.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah,
I do find that that's a very interesting facet of this whole thing. And like you brought up, Mark, you had that experience from the 70s. We had it even more from the 70s because, I remember, when Happy Days first came out, suddenly everything was about the 1950s and, Grease Lightning and Lords of Flatbush and all that stuff. And even things like The Outsiders. all
Oh, right,
were
right.
part of our generations.
And isn't that interesting that we are nostalgic for something that is nostalgic, that's nostalgic for
It's two
something
times
Yeah,
that
we're sort of
we've never even lived.
Yeah,
we're
that's
steps removed from it. Yeah.
And then you go back. I had a very interesting discussion with my mother, my late mother, when the Coen brothers put out "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" And I'm an absolutely massive fan of that.
Yeah.
And I started being nostalgic because of that movie, and was talking to my mother about it because those were the songs I grew up singing.
Oh.
But not because I was experiencing that or ever experienced that time. I mean, that's Dust Bowl stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Right.
my mom and dad lived through the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl. I'm the youngest of 6 kids. My eldest sibling is 15 years and a day older than I am.
Mm.
But I grew up singing Went Down to the River to Pray.
Right.
And those kinds of things. And I asked my mom, and she's just like, yeah, that made me really nostalgic. Now, what you need to know about my mom is that my mom hated being nostalgic, because my mom was nostalgic for a time that she had to literally suffer through.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was truly miserable, and there's no way to sugarcoat it.
Well, and there's no way to sugarcoat the fact that my mother, bless her, miss you, Mom. My mother literally went through the classic, lived in an orphanage after her mother died of an embolism at 5, and my maternal grandfather suffered. My maternal grandfather served as a conscientious objector in World War I, in the Ardennes in France as a ordnance demolition technician.
Oh, great.
Right? No, he was literally responsible for blowing up bombs that hadn't blown up.
Yeah,
And
he was EOD. Yikes.
they often say, back in the day, they used to call it shell shock. My grandfather, it's quite obvious to me now, suffered from CTE, from constant shock to the head, because those guys didn't walk 400 meters away to blow something up. They strapped a stick of dynamite to it, took 20 steps back and just did that, and boom. My mother suffered greatly for that time. And although she brought beauty with her out of that experience, the tone, I remember distinctly the difference in tone between how I was talking about that movie and how she was talking about that movie.
Yeah.
And I found it very interesting. And I'm experiencing, at that point, this Saudi day thing, and she's experiencing nostalgia, but we're both experiencing it so differently. Do any of you guys have something in your bag, in your past, that is, because I think, and this is where we're going with this, nostalgia always kind of has something bittersweet that gets dragged along with it, stuck to the bottom of the shoe.
Nostalgia is those things that made us safe in the past.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Those are the places that we found comfort. Whatever our lives were, however bad things were, every human being finds something that they can take out of that time for comfort. Right. And then we rearrange it. Right. And we romanticize it into something. I have an experience similar to what Mark was describing, in that, for years I fought forest fires, and I find myself romancing it and thinking, how good that was, how good I really felt. And then I take a step back and I realize, oh man, I had to spend 2 weeks in a row with a bunch of other guys, and it smelled like crusty socks.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody was grouchy. Nobody liked going all the way up that hill after the third time. Right. I remember that it wasn't all that great, but I still romance it.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of self-defense mechanism to this too, I think, isn't there? So yeah, Chris.
Before it all got weaponized, and now it's that nostalgia has been weaponized by
Chris,
by
what have you got?
advertising.
What have you got in your back catalog that makes you feel nostalgic but also kind of sad?
Actually, it's funny this question should come up. I was on the phone with a friend of mine from high school 2 nights ago, and we were just sort of reconnecting. We hadn't talked in a couple of years, and we got onto talking about, as you mentioned, kind of the last 7 years have been really sort of hellish, and we find ourselves in a different place. And
I was going to say unique, but hellish works.
Looking back to a simpler time, he and I were doing a little bit of that on the call, and I was like, yeah, for us as kids, I mean, it was a much simpler time. Our biggest worry was whether or not Russia was going to nuke us out of, nuke us into non-existence.
Right.
And then he sort of laughed, and he's like, yeah, and here we are again. But
everything old is.
But that, and this conversation and has me sort of rethinking or recasting that and looking at it in a little bit different way. And that is, yeah, that time was also very scary and very upsetting for a lot of people and very difficult. I think maybe why I remember that differently is because I saw that time period from a very different perspective than I see this time period from. I'm a 50-year-old man.
You definitely have this difference that none of the three. Well, you and I kind of share a little bit of something.
Well, what I'm saying is, I saw that time period from the perspective of a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's not that the time was different; it's that we were different.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's sort of what we miss in nostalgia. Is it almost seems like we're reconnecting with that time where we've sort of recast a lot of our memories in a very positive way to find comfort, when what we're really nostalgic for is maybe a little bit of who we were and how we felt at that time.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of the nostalgia is it's tied to, it's just like a smell. A smell can take you back. You smell the right thing and it
puts you right there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what I'm wondering as I'm listening to us is I'm wondering, especially as we talk about the last 7 years, what are we going to look back on nostalgically in this time frame a few years from now?
I have
Antarctica.
Too soon.
Sorry about that.
That was good. That was actually really good.
In post.
That actually had a fuse on it too.
Yeah, that was
that was a little bit delayed.
In there and run and duck for cover.
Run and hope that you don't get your head wrung.
I have a bit of a theory, maybe not a theory, but I have a prediction. I think that there's going to be a not insignificant number of people that actually look back upon the pandemic nostalgically.
Oh,
I'm already nostalgic for the first 3 months of the pandemic.
Yeah, everything got quiet.
Well, it's not just that everything
traffic.
got quiet.
The air
People actually stopped and reached out to each other.
Yeah.
Celebrities became humans.
Yeah.
Italians were singing out the windows across courtyards to each other.
That's right.
These are the things that I'm going to carry with me. And, when I'm a doddering old man in the nursing home, that's what I'm going to be thinking about about the pandemic was a remarkable moment in humanity.
Yeah. And what's interesting to me is that also kind of ties back, Chris, to what you were talking about us kids growing up in the Cold War. Mm-hmm. And that is, there was something unifying about it. There was something, and it wasn't an us versus them thing, although, I mean, it was, but it was more, we've got to stand locked arm in arm. We need to support each other. We need to be able to count on each other. We need to be able to set aside our differences and find the points of commonality. And you're absolutely right. That happened at the beginning of the pandemic. What's interesting to me is just how quickly it faded away.
Yeah.
For me, the weird positive negative dichotomy thing, I do get nostalgic for my run and gun days back when I was an addict. And this is interesting. And Ty, you're going to be able to speak to this because there's something that happens in addict circles, particularly if you're working 12-step and group programs, where there's always that one guy who really brings his fondness for his addiction into the discussion. And quite often it can make things uncomfortable because they're not aware enough of how much pain discussing that in that way can bring to somebody who is really struggling with their addiction. And so it's often kind of flagged off. But as you get more distant from it, I mean, I've got so many just absolutely absurd, ridiculous stories of what I did in the name of my addictions. And I can laugh at them now, and I feel both blessed and privileged to be able to laugh at them now, because I certainly wasn't laughing about them back then.
Well, you know, and that's, I had a counselor as I was getting sober, that actually encouraged us to look at the things that made us feel good in that addiction, right? The things that were cool in your addiction, right? Because there was a reason that you were in that addiction. Maybe, self-medicating and everything else, but you got a dopamine.
Yeah, what part of it?
There was something going on that kept you there.
Yeah.
And so you can't do anything about that if you don't pay attention to it. If you don't.
Well, and not only that, not pay attention to it so much as you can't make any progress from that place unless you acknowledge the fact that what you were experiencing there was real. That dopamine hit, that's a real thing. And I was like you in that one of my first sponsors kind of took me aside and went, okay, there's a difference between how we address that in a group and how we address that in a peer-to-peer relationship. It's cool between you and me right now, but you need to be aware of how discussing it that way can trigger somebody in a group setting. But I want to validate for you that that is a real thing, because you know what? It was fucking funny. It made you laugh. It was a good time. It was a shared experience and something to look back on with somebody else. And then what a good sponsor or a good counselor will do is say, but that wasn't exclusive to the drug. That wasn't intrinsic to the drug. Where can you find that in behavior that you're doing now that will give you a similar experience?
That's the next step.
Yeah, that's the learning curve of it. Mark, as we go out here, what do you think Aristotle would say about
drop mic moment? Here it is.
I should know the answer to this, and I don't. We'll have to pick it up next time. No, I'm sure you know, because here's the thing. No, the weird thing is, like, I could make something up, but I guarantee you someplace he talks
we'd
about
all buy
this.
into it.
I know, but it's like, here's the deal. It's like somebody out there will know that I'm bullshitting. And it's like, and the thing is that with Aristotle, it's like, you know, if you ever want to tell people you're quoting somebody, just pretend it's Shakespeare. They go, oh, because they're not going to look. But with Aristotle, it's like, odds are he actually said something about nostalgia, and I just can't remember what it was.
I do know who did discuss nostalgia, and that, of course, was Nietzsche. And you know, and I'm sorry, I can't cite a source. I'll try to find it and put it in links. But I remember somewhere, and Nietzsche is gonna lead me to Kierkegaard here. Okay, Nietzsche really looked. Most of the German philosophers of the time were dealing with nostalgia because this was a wave of nostalgia that was happening in the 19th century. And it's embodied in things like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and all these other pieces of literature. But really, most of the German school of thought at the time was that nostalgia actually kind of equaled death. You were not living your life if you were being nostalgic. But it brings me, as I hear Mark typing to try to come up with something from Aristotle.
Actually, my mouse has died.
Oh,
there
okay.
we go. No, never mind.
Just did you turn it off and on again?
I did. Yes, of course I did.
There you go.
Yeah.
Boy, that's there's another point of nostalgia for you right there.
Mark?
Hello.
You know,
computer.
Yeah, testing. When you talk about Kierkegaard and you talk about, one of Kierkegaard's main thrusts was this idea of passion.
Oh, yeah. Well, you can get me started there. I'm going to wait and see how you connect these dots now. Go on.
That's just it. I'm not saying that I can't. I am feeling something there, though. You know, how Kierkegaard, in one of his metaphors, really said that passion is that moment in the air when a dancer is jumping. Right.
Yeah.
That moment in time where everything is suspended and nothing matters. That's the point of passion. And I'm feeling some kind of call to a connection of the dots, but I can't make it.
I think I think this is the right way to go. And so it's always important to remember that passions and emotions are different, right?
Yes.
And that the difference is that emotions are things you have, and passion, which the Latin means to suffer, right? So passions are things you endure.
Yes.
And I wonder I wonder if it isn't where we are with nostalgia, right? That it's we have to endure that, right, rather than just have it. I don't think you kind of deliberately go back and rewrite your relationship to the stuff that happened to you. There's like
a conscious level.
I think it's
there's like a
mechanism.
I think that's a defense mechenism. Actually, it's to make it
mechanism at a minimum. Yeah.
Having been endurable, and so you kind of suffer it. The only thing I can think of in Aristotle comes out of his rhetoric, where he talks about the ways politicians manipulate us. So that link us back and connect us back to memories that none of us had about an America that never existed, right? But we do the same thing. Well, and we do the same thing with our own lives, right? So this is not a new thing.
I think what I want to leave everybody with to pull this out of the fire for folks is, you're right. That the one thing that I do think that nostalgia can do is not engender a sense of hope, but to help create a sense of hope about the future. Because if you, like Ty and I were talking about, if you go back and you look at the reality of what things were, but then find places in your current life and ways to make that same feeling happen again, you can move forward into the future with a little more hope, because what it's making you do is realize that you can't change anything about the past. You can only change your behavior now in order to shape your path into the future. And if we all did that right now, I am pretty sure that the world would be a better place, instead of constantly being nostalgic, looking for how we can recreate goodwill between people as we move into the future. And I guess the last thing to say as we sign off.
That's a mic drop. Thank you, Andy. That's awesome.
Yeah.
If I'm going to have a mic drop moment, it's going to be this. Remember, people, that's Dr. Mark, that's Ty, that's Chris, I'm Andy. We tell you, keep your hat on, because we may end up miles from here. But also, remember, even nostalgia ain't what it used to be. Anyways, we're out of here. We'll see you, I believe, the next time we will be seeing you, or you seeing us, is in 2023. God, really? But anyways, everybody, have a wonderful holiday season. I hope you suffered your turkey passion well, and you're headed towards your roast beast passion with abandon. Anyways, everybody, take care. We'll talk to you next time, and bye-bye.
Charpentry, France, January 1st, 1919. Dearest Mother, well, another year has rolled around, and in place of the grim and hideous spectacle which the last few years have found confronting them on taking their appointed place in the ages, it finds all mankind at peace. I can well imagine with what a frenzied and momentous joy the wild bells ushered in this new year of 1919. God grant that all subsequent years finds the world more securely attached to peace and peaceful pursuits. It would be too bad if this war had been fought in vain, unless the whole world stands as a unit and agrees to abolish compulsory military service and fails to uphold the 14 points of President Wilson's plan. I am sure, in a few years, expect the same awful catastrophe to occur again. and with more terrible and appalling results. There is no way to judge the future but by the past. My prayers are now for the Peace Council, which is soon to sit. I hope God be with them in their work so that their poor blind eyes be able to see their way clear and guide them aright. On their heads rests the future of this turbulent sphere. How well their work is done determines the safety of it. Let us sincerely hope and pray for the best, so that the sacrifices and heroic sufferings and efforts will bear fruit. Private George W. Grady, Ordnance Detachment, American Expeditionary Force, France.